What is up, guys, and welcome to another episode of Q&A, where I take your questions from all over the internet and answer them here on this show in video format. So this week, we got a lot of questions. We're just going to jump right into it. First question comes from Dog Pile Rob, who says, do you think our biggest struggles on offense right now are from Baker focusing on OBJ? Last year, he saw the open receiver, so far this year, it seems like it's been OBJ or bust. I don't think that's the issue. I don't think that having Odell Beckham is the problem for Baker Mayfield right now. Sure, is he looking for Odell Beckham more? Yes. Should he look for Odell Beckham more than other receivers? Yes, because Odell Beckham is a dude who, if he gets the ball in his hands, he could take that thing to the end zone. So I don't blame Baker for looking in OBJ's direction a little bit more. And I don't think that is the problem here. I don't think OBJ is the issue. I think these problems, this chunkiness, would be happening regardless of if you had OBJ, and probably worse if you didn't have OBJ. Because what's happening now is that Baker Mayfield is adjusting to the league, adjusting to him. They're doing all types of new coverages. They're switching up looks on him. I mean, look at the guy we're going to play this week, the Browns are, in Jared Goff. Jared Goff has had a rough 2 weeks because the league is adjusting to what he does well and kind of taking those things away, and he has to learn to make those adjustments. Same thing's going on with Baker. He's just learning how to make calls in the line of scrimmage, get the plays in, and get this thing going. Now, of course, he's working in new pieces like OBJ, but he's also not had some of his key pieces. David Njoku has not been able to stay healthy. And Rashard Higgins has not been able to stay on the field either. I don't think he played a full game in either game so far in the season. So I think those are factors more into it being Baker just looking at OBJ and just targeting OBJ exclusively. I don't think that's the case. I don't think he's force feeding him. I think he's just adjusting to the league. And, you know, when you don't have Rashard Higgins out there, when you don't have your tight end out there, when in doubt, you're probably going to throw the ball up to Odell and see what can happen. So that's just it. I don't think it's Odell's fault. I think it's just more of a Baker thing. The next question comes from 6Below330. Shout out. And he says, tough stretch of games coming up. Where do you see our record after 8 games? I've said it for a while. If you get to the bye week with 3 or 4 wins, you're doing great. So that'd be 3-4, 4-3. After 8 weeks, I believe. I think you're doing great there because, sure, you pay the Patriots after the bye, but then after that, I think you play like Arizona, you play Miami, you get to play Cincinnati twice, you get to play Pittsburgh, one home on a Thursday night, which is statistically an advantage, and then also in Pittsburgh. Also, Pittsburgh does not have Ben Roethlisberger for the year, and then you get the one game at home against the Ravens. So you get 5 division games, 5 of your 6 division games after that stretch. And then you also get 2 teams in the Cardinals and the Dolphins that you should beat. So it's an easier schedule. I wouldn't say easier because it's division. I'm going to take that back. But it's more important. It's a more important stretch those last 8 weeks of the season or so, because it's a lot of division games and a lot of winnable games for the Browns. Right now, you got a game against the Rams, and you go at Baltimore, which is going to be very tough on a bounce back. Then you play Seattle. You know, it's just a rough stretch of games here for the Browns. So, again, 3 or 4 wins. You get to that by 3 or 4 wins. You could lose that game to the Patriots. The Browns could be 3-5 after that game with the Patriots, and I think they'll be completely fine. They could also be 4-5. They could be 5-3. But if they're 3-5, worst case scenario, after that Patriots game, I'm not panicking. I still think they're in very good position to still be able to win the division because, again, you play all of those division games at the end of the season. Next question comes from Trevor Denny, who says, do you think the Browns' offensive line will be able to slow down Aaron Donald? I'm a little nervous. Baker is going to be running for his life. I think it's going to be a lot of emphasis on the Browns coaching staff to be able to scheme things up to get the ball out of Baker's hands quickly. That is just going to have to be the case for this game. Baker cannot hold the ball at all because Aaron Donald is going to destroy everybody sans Joe Bitonio on that offensive line. That's just what it is. So, and Aaron Donald's the type of guy who can move around on the offensive line and find your weakness and just attack that gap. So, yeah, I don't expect the Browns offensive line, even with Aaron Donald having a little bit of a hurt back, to slow down Aaron Donald at all. I expect the Browns coaching staff to find a way to get some points on the board, though, and get the ball out of Baker's hand and minimize the impact that he's going to have, because Aaron Donald is going to have an impact. You just got to make sure he doesn't take over the game. The next question from Twitter comes from Austin Hickman6, who says, after seeing the defensive effort it took to stop Le'Veon Bell, do you think it's possible to slow down Gurley with a passing threat on the team in golf? I'm just going to say something here, and I don't know if it's like a common opinion. I think Le'Veon Bell's better than Todd Gurley right now. I think the guy we played, Le'Veon Bell, last week is better than the guy we're going to play this week. I think Gurley's been different ever since he's had some injury issues, and he just hasn't looked the same for a while. Now, granted, he can run for 200 yards against the Browns and make me look like a complete idiot, but I think Le'Veon is a much harder guy to stop than Todd Gurley. So them being able to slow down Le'Veon Bell and take away what he does well is very encouraging, because they didn't have to do way too much. They didn't have to put 9 in the box to stop Le'Veon Bell. They played a pretty consistently, standard defense, and they were able to slow down Le'Veon Bell, which tells me that front four is going to be able to take care of the bulk of the work when it comes to stopping a running back, which is exactly what you want it to be when you're going to play a team that has guys like Brandon Cooks, Robert Woods, and Jared Goff that can take advantage of that. So I'm pretty confident in the Browns' defense ability to slow down Todd Gurley. The next question comes from Eric Grover, who says, with our starting and backup left tackle hurt, how do you think Dorsey will address the gap for this week's game? I think he meant right tackle. Chris Hubbard was in a boot for practice on Wednesday. So that is a huge concern, because I don't know what the solution is. Maybe you throw Austin Corbett there, but he hasn't been able to win a job on this offensive line in 2 years. So I'm not really confident in that solution. But, I don't really know what John Dorsey can do at this point. Like, he could trade for Trent Williams. It wouldn't be smart. And I don't think that would solve the problem for this week's game, because a dude you signed this week at this point is not going to be ready to start at tackle for you against the Los Angeles Rams. So, they had the guy from Green Bay step in the last time when Chris Hubbard had to slide over to left tackle. So in week 1, and he didn't do a terrible job. So I think that's just going to be the same solution. I'm sorry, I don't remember the dude's name. Number 67. Next question comes from YouTube. It's from the Catster. He says, do you think the Browns will make changes to their offense and defensive schemes? The offense has had a clear tempo issue, and the DBs don't seem to play zone as well as man. It's kind of difficult when it comes to just like switching your entire concept on defense from zone to man, because they have practice zone all this time. So it is just going to take time. I think the frustrating thing with zone is that it's really going to get exploited between the 40s. And it's going to seem like the offense is moving the ball more. Like, I think Trevor Siemian had like an impressive stat line on paper. But if you really watch the games, you would know that he really wasn't able to get anything done in any part of the field that mattered. So like zone schemes are just frustrating like that when you watch them. It's going to look like guys are giving up chunk plays. But that's just kind of the concept of his own scheme, whereas press man schemes can look really good for a while until somebody just breaks you over top. So, I don't think they're going to change up the scheme, because truth be told, the secondary hasn't been the reason why the Browns have had this sloppy start, and has not been an issue for this Browns team. So I just worry about, I do have some concerns about Denzel Ward in this scheme. But everybody else seems to be fine. Greedy Williams has played well. Terrence Mitchell has played well. Even TJ Carey has played well. Demarius was not healthy last week, but, he has played well in his own scheme before. So I'm not really worried about the zone scheme. Now, in offense, I think it's more or less, I think there's something procedural that's being a bottleneck. Maybe it's the play call not getting in. Maybe they're trying to do too much at the offensive line, at the line of scrimmage with adjustments that's happening, or maybe Baker's just getting confused a lot. And I think these are just growing pains that you're just going to have to endure for the time being, until this offense kind of gets into a flow and into a rhythm. Again, a lot of moving parts: new head coach, new offensive coordinator, new best player on offense. This was not all ever going to come together by week 2. So let's give it some time. Let's let this gel. Let's let them get this together and see what the offense is running like in November. Next question comes from Brown's Gratification. It says, are you worried as I am about how many INTs Baker has thrown and is throwing? What can we do to stop this play calling wise? See, now this is an interesting one, right? Because we have compared Baker to one guy, right? Brett Favre. He's a gunslinger. He's very similar to Brett Favre. And when you make that comparison to Brett Favre, you can't ignore the fact that Brett Favre is also somebody who threw way too many interceptions in his career. And I think, that's partly in this younger portion of Baker's career is going to be kind of what he does. He's going to make some amazing throws. He's going to throw some picks. He's going to learn from those things. I don't think he's going to throw as many picks as Brett Favre, but, that's just jumping the gun. But, I think he's going to throw interceptions in his first 3 years of the league. That's going to be part of his game, and that's why it's important that you have a defense like the Browns do to be able to minimize the impact of those mistakes, because with Baker's mentality, there are going to be plays that you would never be able to get if he wasn't willing to be so risky. But there's also going to be a lot of plays that are going to make you frustrated that he threw because he's willing to be so risky. So I think you just got to take these lumps with Baker. I don't think there's nothing you could do with the play calling, and I don't think there's really anything you want to, because you don't want him to turn into another check down guy. His mentality and his confidence is part of what separates him from a lot of other quarterbacks. So, you just got to let it fly and let him learn at his own pace and let him make those adjustments. Next question comes from Jake Tobin, and he says, will the Dolphins go 0-16? Man, I don't want to wish or predict 0-16 on anybody, so I'll say no. But, I have to mention something here about tanking here, right? Because I think there's a fine line in sports, when it becomes tanking, as a legitimate strategy in sports to get your team better and turn around, and then it becomes tanking as just a clown show. And I think the Dolphins are a complete clown show. When I mention tanking in a respectable manner, I would think of an example like the Cincinnati Bengals, right? The Cincinnati Bengals have 3 players who are starting to get older, who still have a lot of value. They have Andy Dalton, they have A.J. Green, they have Geno Atkins. I think it would be smart for them to get rid of those 3 guys, let them be on contending teams that need them, and get assets back in return for them so they can put more around a young core of players they already have, and flip that team around to something competitive within 1 or 2 years. That's tanking, but that's ethical, in my opinion, because you're not taking it to this extreme where it doesn't have to go. What the Dolphins are doing is just comical. They traded a dude they drafted 11th overall last year. I don't even think they're trying to win anytime soon. Like, this isn't tanking. This is just a mockery being made of the game, to be honest with you. This isn't about winning anytime soon. If they were about winning anytime soon, they would have kept Laramie Tunsil because he's a young guy they would have had still under contract. They wouldn't have got rid of Minkah Fitzpatrick because he's a young guy they still had under contract. And a lot of guys are going to bring up the parallel to the Browns. The Browns kept the young players that they drafted throughout their tanking. Say what you want about the Browns. They gave Duke Johnson his money while they were tanking. They gave Christian Kirksey his money while they were tanking. They gave Joe Bitonio his money while they were tanking. And those dudes, minus Duke Johnson because he didn't want to be here anymore, are still on the team benefiting from that. Sure, did the Browns make moves that were obviously not in the way of trying to compete, like trading $2 million for Brock Osweiler to get a second-round pick, like getting rid of Joe Hayden when he was clearly the best player on your defense? Yes, but they also traded for dudes like Jamie Collins and thought that was going to be a guy who was going to be integral to a rebuild in 1 or 2 years. Also, when we talk about tanking and we talk about the success stories, we don't talk about how lucky those success stories had to be in order to happen in the way that they did. We talk about the Philadelphia 76ers, right? and we talk about how that worked because they accumulate all the picks. We don't talk about Nerlens Noel. We don't talk about Jahlil Okafor. We don't talk about these dudes that were supposed to be part of this rebuild that were completely ruined by what they were doing. We don't talk about how lucky they were to even get Joel Embiid because he had a knee injury coming out of Kansas, and that was the only reason he wasn't the number 1 overall pick that year. We don't talk about them drafting Markelle Fultz and having to trade him for pennies on the dollar. We don't talk about the fact that they had to change GMs in order to make this thing actually happen in the way that they wanted to and use those assets to win. When we talk about the Browns a lot, we bring up the Browns name when we talk about the tanking, what the Dolphins are doing. People don't mention, hey, the Browns hit on 3 first-round picks in 2017. 3 of them. 3 of them. That's not common. That's a very hard thing to do. They got a good tight end in David Njoku. They got Myles Garrett, and they got Jabril Peppers. Jabril Peppers was good enough for you to trade to the Giants as a first-round pick to get Odell Beckham Jr. here. And also in the middle of that, a very good GM shook loose from the Kansas City Chiefs and became available. These things ain't just going to happen for the Dolphins because they're committed to losing. And I think when we talk about making this commitment to tanking, we think that the odds are so much more in your favor. When I think it really is about a 5% difference if they would have just been committed to putting a decent team out on the field rather than doing what they're doing now. I don't think it's that huge of a difference. I don't think it's actually going to be the difference in this. I think for the Dolphins to benefit from tanking, they got to get lucky. If they don't get lucky, then they just wasted a whole bunch of people's times and ended a whole bunch of dudes' careers for no reason. This question comes from Spastic PS4. He says, do you, like me, think that the Browns should be using Nick Chubb much more than they are? Feels like they're forcing a passing game. This is a two-sided street. So, yes, should the Browns probably be passing the ball less and handing the ball off to Nick Chubb in a perfect world? I would agree. But also we have to think about what the biggest weakness on this offense is, and it's the offensive line right now. So relying on them to run the ball a lot, I just don't know if it's a good idea. In practice, I think it's not something that's going to work out as well as fans think it is. Let's also note that Nick Chubb only had a 3.4 yards per carry average last game, so it didn't really indicate that they should have ran the ball more. But, I think the offensive line right now needs to find its rhythm and find its chemistry, and I think that's the bigger problem right now. And that's going to be it for this week's Q&A. What do you think is the issue with the Browns offense? Do you think they're going to have it solved by Sunday night's game? Let me know in the comment section down below. But that is it for this week's show. Thank you guys for watching. Have a great day. Have a good night. And take care.